Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Wednesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. It's the first day of training camp, and Darvin Ham's got some non-negotiables. We'll talk about them next on Locked On Lakers.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, sometimes on weekends. No matter how or where you get your podcasts, it's always going to be free for you. It's never going to be behind a paywall. And Locked On Lakers on YouTube, Andy, is where people can go to watch the show and see it happen. And just as importantly, generally speaking, get a little bit earlier, a little bit quicker than the audio product. So it's a good way to get ahead of the game, and it's a good way to engage with a lot of other Lakers fans on this channel, which is really growing fast, and we really appreciate everybody's support there. So we did not get into the Pat Bev experience, which was one of the headlining stories from Monday's media day. So we got a lot of stuff that we want to talk about with Pat Bev, both as a player, certainly his relationship with Russ, and would you call it, Andy, a reframing from both of those guys of their relationship?
Yes, in that there was previously no other way to frame it, seemingly. It could only be reframed because before it seemed pretty obviously poisonous.
So, but apparently it wasn't. So that is something that we're going to get into as the show goes along. But let's start, Andy, with the first day of school. They were out there and practice began. It is officially, going, and to a man, the Lakers seem impressed with Darvin Ham and the way he runs a practice. And he's got clocks on everything, and it's all very efficient. And he seems intent on using everyone's time wisely. And let me tell you something, there is nothing that players appreciate more than a coach who is going out of their way to not waste their time.
Yeah, you and I covered the team when Mike Brown was brought in.
I knew you were going to talk about this. Absolutely.
We love Mike Brown as a person. He's got an incredible defensive mind. I've heard from a lot of people that have been around him when he was on the Warriors staff that he's grown in a lot of ways that could lead to him being better equipped to be a head coach. That the Sacramento stint could be a really good match for him. But Brian and I both knew, this ain't going to work. When they hired Mike during the lockout, so they arranged this lunch with local media, including me and Brian, and Mike Brown. And, we were basically getting introduced to him, asked questions of him. And he took out these 3-ring binders, one of which was labeled offense, the other labeled defense, and the third was labeled practice. And I was just like, man, this is going to be a problem for guys like Kobe and Powell and Fisher and Meta and all these guys who've been in the league forever and don't need this. Mostly practice is just maintenance and treatment. They don't need this stuff.
Yeah, it was just too much. And so, guys want to be efficient. They want to know what is expected of them. And that was the other half that really came through on the first day of official practices, is that, the attention to detail was there, the laying down of standards, what people called, I guess, core principles, the house rules, I think is how guys refer to it. And the expectations, here's what they're going to be. Darvin said, philosophically, defensively, the rules are contain, contest, and control. Offensively, it's fast, physical, and fun. Clearly, he's a fan of alliteration. Coaches
as are all
alliteration.
Coaches love alliteration.
I think it's because it's easy. Alliterative stuff is easy to remember. What are my 3 C's, guys? Contain, contest, and control.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing. Darvin has preached accountability throughout the time, throughout the summer, throughout any moment where he's spoken to the media, whether it's, to a press conference forum, whether it's a radio interview, whatever it is. And so to hear him lay down markers on day one, it's not surprising, but it is, it fits right in with what you would expect from him. And I think this is the beginning of the Darvin Ham experience in that regard.
Yeah, Juan Toscano Anderson, who is from a very, very well-run organization with the Warriors, and a franchise. Steve is very into details. With players like Steph and Clay, Draymond, Iggy, who really appreciate that stuff. And he said, "quote, day one was much better than I anticipated, just because we have a new team and staff. I'm very satisfied." He mentioned that they were learning everybody, but just as we talked about, the collective IQ and that attention to detail is really strong. Darvin, I also thought this was interesting, talked about how he's sought out the advice of guys like Mike Budenholzer or Quinn Snyder, who he described as like his pro bono coaching consultant, and different guys around the league that he's worked with, and that he's really, I think, trying to put himself in the best position possible, knowing that he's experienced on staffs, but he's never had this job before. And you can never be too prepared. And I know what I said about Mike Brown before, but
no, but it's not a question of being too prepared. It's a question of which aspects of that preparedness. Do you have to use all that? Do you have to, you can have the full script. You can have the full book of things and understand that you are prepared for every scenario. It doesn't mean you have to, rehearse everything. It doesn't mean you have to. There is such a thing as over preparedness in the amount of time you spend on the execution, or the amount of stuff you put on other players, the amount of statistics you give them. There is too much, but that's different than feeling as the head coach that you are prepared for whatever's coming.
Yeah, he actually said that the consensus advice that he got from all of these guys was just Rome was not built in a day. And, pick a couple things each day that you want to focus on, and just really be, I think, very purposeful in what you pick. So it feels like you're building towards something, but you're not going to accomplish it all in one day.
And it can't be absorbed. And that's the thing. That's the thing about it is, this is one of the things that I was really curious about. I did not get a chance to ask this of Darvin, and I will at some point, is just that what changes? What changes when you move from the lead assistant to the head coach in terms of the kind of relationships that you build, the type of information that you deliver, what's your responsibility, where you have to be a little bit more hands off, and where you have to kind of trust that people are going to get it. And, I think whether you're dealing with professional basketball players or anyone else, what information you choose to focus on is really sort of the telltale thing. And because you can pick a lot of stuff, and editing, it's something we've lived with in our careers. Like how you edit is a critical thing. How you edit a practice, how you edit a game film, and all that kind of stuff. And guys will see over time, like what really matters to Darvin and what his principles are based on that type of editing. How he does his practices and game film and everything.
Well, Russell Westbrook after practice was in a very good mood, very much all smiles, and said about the first practice, it's always great to get a new coach's energy.
That felt pointed.
It felt pointed. It felt like
but I mean, if there was a big takeaway from Media Day, it is that Russell Westbrook likes Darvin Ham a lot more than Frank Vogel.
Which, look, that's what it's, whether fair or not, it is what matters most right now.
Yep. And Darvin had some things to say that probably made Russ very happy in other ways. We will get to that next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net, your number one source for all your pro and college football betting needs and sports info this season. Find all the latest football league developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. The fastest, easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, golf, and also, of course, the NBA. And if you are looking to get ahead of the 2023 season, maybe lay down a little early action, the Lakers currently 22-1 odds to win the championship, down a bit from the beginning of the summer. But who knows, maybe this first practice, everybody's positive about it, a sign of things to come. Anthony Davis, 20-1 right now to win Defensive Player of the Year, behind guys like Robert Williams and Jaren Jackson Jr., who aren't even going to start the season healthy. He should take that personally. Darvin Ham getting 18-1 odds for Coach of the Year. So head to the website today, use your mobile device, learn more about the trends in action. Bet online where the game starts.
A couple housekeeping things before we get to the news on Tuesday around Westbrook. We've said all summer long, Andy, until we see Kendrick Nunn, like really see that Kendrick Nunn is on the floor behaving and doing things like a basketball player without restrictions, there is the temptation to not believe those things are going to happen. Well, Tuesday we saw it. Nunn missed all last season with that knee injury, the bone bruise, was a full participant in Tuesday's practice, no restrictions. He's out there, he's playing. So that is a big deal. The Lonnie Walker, he's got a little ankle thing. Troy Brown's got a back thing. Those guys missed practice. But neither of those injuries is expected to be serious. Dennis Schroeder is healthy, but still awaiting his visa so he can enter the country.
Really quick with Kendrick Nunn, he said after today's practice, quote, "It's been a long time coming, and I feel real good now. I feel a lot stronger. I got my quickness back." And this was something I know I asked Kendrick about this during media day, just like the mental toll this has played on him. Missing an entire season, when you're a young player still establishing yourself in the league, like it's one thing to get injured when you're older. And while that's obviously a source of anxiety, it is something that you start to expect once you're in the tail end of your career.
Least, you've probably been hurt before. You have context, right. You know how to handle it, whatever it might be.
And like for Kendrick Nunn, this is early in his career as he's trying to establish himself, and also a very perplexing bone bruise. I mean, this was something that I think was very frustrating for him to deal with, probably very scary for him to deal with. Just like, why is my body not recovering? And he said that it's taken a lot of like faith and trust in the training staff to be patient with what they're doing and to like ramp himself up gradually and incrementally so he doesn't take any steps backwards like we occasionally saw seemingly over the course of last season. But he seems not just happy to be back, but frankly relieved.
I'm sure. One more, so we'll see how he plays. I mean, that's the other thing. It would be really nice to see once he gets out on the court next week when the preseason games start. One more bit of housekeeping. I don't think we mentioned it on Media Day. I think it happened afterwards. I forget. Dwayne Bacon and Matt Ryan, not the quarterback, two small forwards, 6'7", 6'8" types, both signed to training camp contracts. Darvin says that both have an opportunity to compete for the final roster spot. Normally, the Lakers would leave that open, except they have no wings. And so if ever there was a time where a guy might be able to get a non-guaranteed deal and at least stick around for the first half of the season, this would seem like one of those opportunities because the Lakers have no wings. Dwayne Bacon's bounced around a little bit. I frankly have no idea who Matt Ryan is, but I read the little bio they sent out. He's a 20-point a game scorer in the G League, I think, last year. So, good luck to both of them. If either one of those guys can help,
I'll tell you right now, if they can defend, forget about scoring, but if they can defend,
they got a shot.
They could have a shot.
They got a shot. Dwayne Bacon's never been a particularly efficient scorer, and I haven't paid that close to. We'll see. There is an opportunity for somebody of that height to make this team. There's no question about that. So let's get to Russ, as we talked about it on at length for Tuesday's show following Media Day, that very quickly it was established by Darvin Ham that no starting position should be guaranteed or expected for Westbrook. He was asked if Westbrook is a definitive starter, and he did not say yes. He said we have a variety of options. We got a lot of time, and guys are going to have to play defense and all these other things. He did clarify a little bit on Tuesday, though, that he thinks of Russ as a starter. He believes that Russ, asked about if he plays defense, that Darvin said, quote, absolutely, he views Westbrook as one of his first five. So if you wanted to believe from Monday that it was a sign that Westbrook would be coming off the bench, you certainly need to amend that to could, not will or would.
Yeah, it was funny. Darvin during practice, or afterwards, I should say, said that there's a narrative that's been out there about Russ possibly not starting. He's like, which I never said. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's been thrown out there. Acting like he's not sure where this is coming from, and Darvin knows where it is. I mean, it's happened in part because Darvin has let it be known.
Right. But he hasn't said he won't start. He just said It's not guaranteed that he will. And those are different things.
But like the idea, though, that it would be in question or that he would have any doubt about it, it is in part because Darvin's done that, I think, with good reason. Like the idea that he is establishing himself as in charge of this team, establishing that there are standards for even somebody like Russell Westbrook that he has to meet at a baseline level before he could feel comfortable with that job. And, considering the issues Russ had fitting in last year and the things that he was not doing and the asks that will be there for him this year, if he is going to fit in better, it's smart of Darvin. But I mean, what I think he really wants to say and just can't, because anything he says will become a story with this, is just like, look, all things being equal, if it's feasible, Russ is going to start because A, he's the most purely talented of all my options at point guard, and B, it's a hell of a lot simpler if Russell Westbrook is starting. Like, it's much better if Russ is happy than unhappy. Like, I don't really have to explain why Russell Westbrook is starting. I do have to explain if he's not. Like, everything becomes much more streamlined and simpler, and hopefully,
he would have to
earn this gig,
but he would have to explain it, but to like people on a Reddit subthread. I don't think Darvin is going to take the time to do it. He also, I mean, this is a point worth making. He also said, like, the big deal. I quote, "I really think it's the minutes." For me, it's about who finishes the game as well. That's almost just as important, or not, or more important than who starts. And there's a lot of truth to that. I wonder how fans would react if Westbrook comes off the bench but plays 32 minutes as a six-man, 30 minutes a game as a six-man, and finishes every fourth quarter.
Like Lamar Odom did.
Right. I mean, I suspect that more of them, if they could choose, would say, okay, fine, start him if it means he doesn't have to play at the end of the fourth quarter. So, the combinations here and the context are going to matter a lot. Which other guys are in the starting lineup? Do they play with a traditional center or don't they? All of these things are going to be are going to guide the combinations that they go with. They have too many guards, and so a lot of this is just going to be based on who they play, who those guys are effective with, and the defensive combinations that go on around them. So that was
but Russ seemed very happy. He seemed really happy after this practice, and he seemed in a genuinely good mood and excited and open towards what was coming next.
Russ didn't he said what happened to me last year doesn't really matter, and he kind of glossed over some of that stuff, but he didn't say, like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. Like, we had there wasn't any tension. There wasn't, like, he didn't pretend that last year went smoothly. But I've said this throughout the summer. There is a chance. Athletes are great, Andy, at just sort of creating whatever world view that needs to be there so they can go out and do their jobs. And in this particular case, the the avenue is wide open for a reset, and new coach, new staff, new roster, all of this stuff. And it doesn't erase last year, but it gives everybody an opportunity to kind of pretend that it doesn't matter, because everybody's starting over. And, at the very least, it's good to see Westbrook in a good mood for the beginning of it, because the mood didn't last very long last year. One thing that everybody seems to be in a good mood is the relationship between Pat Bev and Russ. I don't know what we were ever questioning. That's next. So you asked Andy, because Pat Bev told a story about how Russ got his sister courtside tickets when Russ was with the Rockets. And originally, Beverley thought that he was like talking smack, like somehow I got your sister courtside seats is like some form of smack talk.
If you're on the court, and just the word your sister comes up,
sounds
you are immediately going to be assuming the worst until like your brain slows down for a
your
second.
Your antenna are up.
Yeah.
And then you look and you see your sister actually sitting over there.
Right. Or you hear your sister and you're immediately picturing the most, foul outside the lines, below board. Like, you're picturing what Kevin Garnett would say in that moment. Let's be honest.
So Pat Beverley talked about that as like a sort of a turning point in the relationship. This is like 5 years ago.
Well, okay, we're going to get to that.
But they mentioned chapel, seeing each other at chapel. Beverley said that Westbrook was his best friend on the team so far. I mean, it's his first day of school. He hasn't really gotten to know Jay Huff all that well.
Yeah, I mean, look, your bestie on the first day at a new school is rarely your bestie on the last day of the new school.
And then you asked him about, okay,
yeah.
So if you guys are like such good buddies, WTF, all that other stuff like that has been going on.
So Pat Bev had been, like you said, talking about just how the relationship between him and Russ not just is fine now, but has been better for longer than people have expected or assumed. And I just asked him, I'm like, so have we just all been wrong about this, like this whole time? Because from the outside looking in, this has seemed unusually hostile. And he said, yeah, you've been wrong. To which I said, how would we have misinterpreted, like everybody misinterpreted like this? And he said, quote, I'm pretty sure everybody's been in a relationship where it felt like it would go forever, right? It's just the same. You could just have whatever feelings, but if it's not the entire truth, then you don't know the history behind it or you don't know the valid points behind it. Russ, when he was in Houston, we're battling and he comes to me and says, your sister, I gave her my courtside tickets. He was with Houston then. We're still trying to cut each other's necks off. You know what I'm saying? So like the bond really started from there. We're talking like 4 or 5 years ago, but it's entertaining to see you guys hold on to it for so long though. But on the outside looking in, highway news, you read it, you throw it out the window, you keep going. Our relationship kind of turned from there. One of the things that jumped out at me, I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. He mentioned this 4 or 5 years ago. Russell Westbrook played in Houston one season, 2019, 2020. So I looked it up, and the only game he could have been talking about, unless he had the season completely mixed up, which seems improbable because I don't know why Patrick Beverley's sister would be in like Oklahoma City. that feels random. Pat Bev played in Houston for several years. It feels much more believable that she had stayed in Houston after presumably being with him for a while Pat Bev was there. So that means this game happened in 2019. So let's just take Patrick Beverley at his word and Russ at his word. Ever since this gesture where Russell Westbrook gifted Patrick Beverley's sister those tickets, everything has been copacetic. I don't know that I really believe that entirely, but let's just say that we do.
We did call him trash last year.
Right. He held his nose. But let's just give him the benefit of the doubt that these guys just take trash talking to the limits, but the minute the game is over, it's over. This did not happen 4 or 5 years ago. This means we still had 6 or 7 years before what they described as the turning point. So the point being, we were not making all of this up. Like, they've both acknowledged there was a thing until fairly recently at best.
What I think is kind of fascinating here is, I mentioned it before, athletes construct the reality that they need for the given situation that they're in. If they get off to a great start, it's that's how you want to be doing. If you get off to a bad start, it's fine. We've got time. If you're hot going into the playoffs, it's great. You want your rest and all that stuff. If you had a scratch and claw to get in there, it's great because you're battle tested and now you're ready to go. Like whatever the reality is that's right in front of them is the best of all possible worlds. And so this feels to me like one of those situations where a few things can be true at once. I think they are, not without, understandable reasons, downplaying the feud.
Sure. They should.
I think it is also possible that it probably wasn't, there are elements of this sort of hyper competitive culture where still, even with that, there is this sort of mutual respect of, hey, we're all still in the same club here. Pat Beverley is 100% seems like one of those guys that I hate you. The minute you're his teammate, it's like, this is how I roll.
Russ is like that too. Russ has always been described that way. He's always described himself that way.
So, the notion, these are guys like, once you become my teammate, okay, we can, athletes are pretty good at changing that mindset pretty quickly and just being like, yeah, that was when we weren't on the same team. Now we are, and therefore it doesn't always work that way. And Beverly acknowledged the need to have some honest conversations when they fight,
which feels unusual for two people who don't have a problem.
Who are besties anyway. So I don't think it's total BS like what they're trying to peddle, but I also think it's also it speaks to me of the sort of pro athlete mindset that I find so I find fascinating about all of these guys is because they are a different species than the rest of us, because they have achieved at this ultra elite level and you have to do things mentally, particularly if you're somebody like Beverly, who doesn't profile as a guy who's just going to waltz into the league.
No, he in fact did not waltz into the league.
Right.
He spent a few years overseas after getting drafted in the second round by the Lakers, and then sent to Miami the same day and getting cut in Miami's training camp. He played in Russia, he played in other places. He had to really fight to stay in the league. And
so a guy like that, constructs the world that he needs in order to keep the edge. And that is like the Beverly energy is real. It is substantial. And it is something that was not with the Lakers last season. How it translates throughout an 82 game season for this group, I think it'll be positive, but we have to see what that is first. But it is a different thing. And like the Beverly's energy, Westbrook's headlines were the story of day one. But in terms of like just individual players and like what was that exactly? The story was Patrick Beverley, and the way he talked about, holding other guys accountable, the way he stuck up for his own achievements in this league, and his accomplishments, like all of this stuff is like he legit brings an edge to this team and an attitude to this team that Patrick Beverley noted that they did not have last year.
Look, Patrick Beverley creates an energy just in the way he interacted with us. Like each individual question from a reporter, he wanted it to begin with like, "How you doing, Patrick? Patrick,
how are you today?
Doing okay.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Yeah,
how are you?
Like,
yes, nice to see you. Good. Yeah.
Yes. That is an energy in and of itself. Like that is a demand that I'm putting on you guys as media in terms of our relationship together. And this is a very small ask that I don't think anybody minded. It actually was pretty entertaining, but it nonetheless, I think is indicative of how he interacts with everybody. It's like,
but it's also too, it's a mechanism that keeps people slightly off center, slightly off edge.
yes,
Slightly.
that's my point.
It's not just being like, I demand politeness or like friendly, but it's just and you can see it when he's on the court. Like he sends out a very uncomfortable energy. Like when you're playing against it, when you're like, it's sort of like tweaky and weird. And
you know what? Here's the thing. I wouldn't say it's always uncomfortable. What it is though is off kilter. Like he wants things to be slightly off balance, I think, in everything. Because like I don't think, for example, I don't think he necessarily always wants it to be uncomfortable. Like we covered the Dodgers like a decade and a half ago, and we covered Jeff Kent's time with the Dodgers. He always wanted it to be uncomfortable. Like in ways,
it was because he didn't want you to talk to him.
Right. Like he wanted everybody on edge so he would be left alone. And there are degrees to this. Like, Kobe and LeBron have both talked about the value of discomfort and being uncomfortable. And that was really just about, I don't want people relaxing too much on my watch. I think with Patrick Beverley, there sometimes is going to be discomfort thrown out there, particularly at opponents. But I think he values just off kilter. I think he likes things a little bit like in poker terms.
We'll learn more about it. I just see that as another one of these sort of mechanisms that helps give him advantage because he's a guy who physically is not dominant. He's 34 years old. I mean,
gets hurt a lot.
We will explore Patrick Beverley a lot throughout the course of camp, try to kind of gauge how his presence is changing the mindset and the attitude of this team, in addition to Darvin Ham and all that. Because I do think it is telling that Beverley consistently points out that the thing that he brings is something that, from his perspective looking in, the Lakers sorely lacked last year.
He wasn't wrong. He ain't wrong.
And Lord knows the Wolves often had their way with the Lakers. So, all right. Much more to come as training camp rolls on. We still have some stuff from media that we haven't finished up yet. So they're going to keep providing us some news and games start next week. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you go to get the podcast a little early. Subscribe there, become part of that community. We appreciate you doing that for us. Make another Locked On podcast your second listen of every day. We'll see you Thursday.